How do you say you were fired without actually saying you were fired? Today's story dives into that panic-ridden moment when someone asks, "So why did you leave your last job?" And your soul briefly leaves your body. It's vulnerable, it's messy, and it's something so many people quietly struggle with. And honestly, the story we're exploring today just might make you feel a little less alone. So let's take that big, universal fear of admitting a setback and zoom in on one person's experience, a good-hearted employee who walked straight into workplace chaos and wound up paying the price.
The question at the center of today's story is simple but heavy. How do you explain a firing in an interview when the truth is tangled in burnout, terrible management, and a job that wasn't what you signed up for? And as always, people online chimed in with a range of perspectives. Some comforting, some strategic, and some downright hilarious. Let's explore what they had to say.
Just a quick welcome to Better Life FAQs. If you want more simple, practical answers like this, be sure to share, like, and subscribe. Now, let's continue. First up, a voice of reassurance and gentle strategy. This commenter suggests dropping the job entirely if the stint was short, and if not, mastering the art of polite badmouthing while keeping everything framed as a learning experience. What makes this take so compelling is how it acknowledges both the emotional messiness and the practical side of job hunting. The idea of politely badmouthing a place without sounding bitter is genuinely useful, because interviews aren't confessionals, they're auditions. You want to be honest, but you also want to sound like someone who can handle adversity without spiraling. Their reassurance that getting fired happens to plenty of people cuts right through the shame that often clings to situations like this. It's a reminder that short roles don't have to be life sentences on your resume, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to move on cleanly. Imagine saying, "The role presented unique challenges, but it taught me a lot about communication," instead of recounting every meltdown your manager had. That's the energy this commenter is encouraging. Still, this strategy can backfire if you rely too heavily on vague positivity. Interviewers can sense when you're dodging specifics, but when handled well, it walks the perfect line between truth and professionalism. Think of a hypothetical. You were hired by a startup that constantly pivoted. Instead of saying, "My boss had no idea what she was doing," you say, "The direction was changing faster than expected, and I learned how to adapt quickly." Same truth, different vibe, and that's exactly where its power lies. Now, if that felt like gentle coaching, our next commenter leans even more into discipline and strategy.
This next perspective is all about control and composure. This commenter insists you should never volunteer that you were fired. Just offer a neutral, future-focused explanation and move on. This advice speaks to something many people overlook. Interviews are partly about how you manage discomfort. Removing the word fired from your vocabulary isn't denial. It's boundary setting. It's choosing not to let a single moment overshadow the entire narrative of your career. Their tip to practice your answer out loud is huge. Confidence often emerges from repetition, not perfection. And the suggestion to pivot immediately into why you're excited about the new role keeps you from dwelling on the past while signaling forward momentum. Still, this method has its limits. If an interviewer directly asks what happened, you can't dodge forever without seeming evasive. That's where their advice to anchor your answer in truth without criticism becomes essential. A line like, "The role wasn't what I anticipated, and I realized I needed more challenging work," feels honest, calm, and rooted in growth. It protects your dignity without throwing anyone under the bus. And it reminds you that control of tone, of pace, of framing is a form of power in job interviews. From disciplined strategy, we move to something simpler and softer, an easy, low-stress approach.
This next commenter keeps things clean and straightforward. They suggest simply saying the position was eliminated, noting that employers can't legally reveal departure details anyway. This advice lands like a deep exhale, uncomplicated, no fuss, emotionally neutral. When you're feeling shaken after being fired, sometimes a simple line like, "My role was eliminated," feels like a relief because it removes the emotional storytelling entirely. It's true that employers rarely share the messy details behind an exit, which makes this strategy feel safer. But there's a catch. Using this line comfortably depends on your own integrity and comfort level. If it feels too far from your truth, it might only add stress during interviews. Still, it highlights something important. Most hiring managers aren't detectives. They're problem solvers looking for someone who can help them. So if a clean, neutral explanation allows you to speak with clarity and confidence, it can be incredibly effective. Take a hypothetical. A small company restructures after a failed product launch. Instead of recounting every dysfunctional meeting, you simply say, "There were organizational changes, and my role was impacted." That line closes the door on the drama without denying your experience. But if that approach feels a bit too tidy, the next answer brings in humor and a clever twist on the truth.
Here comes the comic relief. This viewer suggests saying we agreed it was time to part ways, with a joke that the agreement was simply accepting being fired. Humor, when used wisely, can be a powerful tool for diffusing shame. This suggestion embraces the idea that not every explanation needs to be loaded or emotional. Sometimes diplomacy is enough. Saying we mutually agreed to part ways is one of those phrases everyone recognizes as corporate code. It's polite, neutral, and it clears the path for better conversation. The joke itself glances at the uncomfortable truth. Firing is rarely mutual, but choosing the diplomatic line shows maturity, not avoidance. That said, this approach works best when paired with a calm tone and a quick pivot to what you learned. If you use it too flippantly, it risks making you sound like you're hiding something. Imagine interviewing for a customer-focused role and saying that line with a warm smile before adding, "And I'm excited to find a place where I can contribute more meaningfully." That's the sweet spot between honesty and self-protection. If humor isn't your style, our next commenter goes for a crisp, almost minimalist approach.
This one keeps it short and simple. They recommend just saying you were laid off with your team and call it a day. This approach emphasizes the desire to avoid unnecessary vulnerability, and for many people, that's a valid instinct. Interviews aren't therapy, and oversharing can sometimes harm your chances. But while saying you were laid off can work, it also presents a moral dilemma for some. If your departure wasn't part of a larger layoff, this line may feel disingenuous or even add anxiety, because you're carrying a secret instead of a simple truth. The deeper message here, though, is important. You don't owe every detail of your trauma to potential employers. You deserve to protect your peace. Still, the strongest interviewing strategies usually blend truth with boundaries. A more grounded version of this idea might be, there were changes happening, and the role wasn't the right fit anymore. That line stays true without exposing the mess. And in many cases, that balance feels safer and more empowering than bending the narrative too far. Next up, someone who's been in the trenches themselves and comes bearing hard-earned empathy.
Here comes a dose of shared experience and pep talk sincerity. This commenter admits they were fired twice in similar situations and urges the poster to be brief, positive, and focused on lessons learned. There's something incredibly healing about hearing, "Hey, I've been there." When someone openly shares that they've been fired more than once, it immediately dismantles the shame. Their advice to keep explanations short and centered on growth hits the sweet spot of honesty and composure. It reinforces the idea that maturity isn't about never facing setbacks, it's about how you process them. And the phrase, "It's never the scandal, it's the cover-up," rings true. Interviewers care far more about your attitude than a specific incident. But this approach comes with its own challenge, keeping things brief while still maintaining authenticity. Imagine saying, "I learned a lot about stress management and clearer communication," followed by a calm silence. That takes confidence. The real value of this advice is in showing that setbacks don't erase your potential, they refine it. And hearing that from someone who's lived it can be deeply reassuring. From personal stories of resilience, we move to something more understated, but quietly powerful.
This next answer brings subtle strength. The commenter shares they were wrongfully terminated, but eventually reached a settlement, implying closure and validation. This perspective adds a layer of dignity to the conversation. Wrongful termination is often traumatic. Yet this commenter mentions it with simplicity and calm, signaling that justice, however imperfect, can restore confidence. It's a reminder that getting fired doesn't automatically mean you failed. Sometimes it means the system around you failed. The understated delivery here suggests resilience without bitterness, which is a tone many interviewers appreciate. But this kind of statement only works when it's true and when you can say it without sounding defensive. You wouldn't want to unpack a legal case in an interview, but a discreet line like, "The situation was resolved and I'm ready for a fresh start," keeps things clean. The real lesson from this commenter is that closure, not explanation, is what allows you to move forward. And confidence born for resolution is often more powerful than any scripted narrative. From quiet resolve, we shift to one of the more structured approaches offered, a formula for reframing adversity.
This next take is polished and professional. The commenter provides a 3-part template. Say there were layoffs, highlight new opportunities, and connect it to your excitement about the role you're interviewing for. This advice leans into storytelling structure, setting up a challenge, revealing the positive outcome, and tying it to your future goals. For many people, this framing feels comfortable because it provides both clarity and optimism. But the key to making it work is to stay genuine. If your departure didn't involve layoffs, claiming it did may add internal pressure during interviews. Still, the idea of reshaping hardship into momentum is powerful. It encourages you to think of the firing not as a dead end, but as a pivot point. Picture saying, "The transition gave me space to reflect on the kind of company I want to grow with." And suddenly, the focus is on your future, not your past. This strategy works best for those who like having a polished script to fall back on, especially when nerves run high. And that structure can help steady you when you're still emotionally processing a difficult experience. Now let's turn to a commenter who brings a bolder, more unfiltered voice to the mix.
Here comes the tough love perspective. This commenter argues that top performers rarely get fired, then offers a thoughtful and honest script focused on adaptation and resilience. This viewpoint starts with a blunt statement that might sting, but it's rooted in workplace truths about how dysfunctional dynamics can push people out. Still, the real value of this comment comes afterward, in the nuanced, honest wording they offer as an alternative to cliches. Instead of pretending the job ended cleanly, they suggest acknowledging the challenges while emphasizing how you grew from them. This strikes a balance many people crave. Honest without angry, reflective without self-punishing. It also recognizes that sometimes you're fired because the environment was broken, not because you were. The script they suggest shows adaptability, communication, and emotional intelligence, all while avoiding negativity. This approach is ideal for people who feel uncomfortable with overly neat narratives like "I was laid off," but who also don't want to spill the tea about every problem they faced. It's authenticity with guardrails. And for many job seekers, that's exactly the middle ground they need. Finally, we circle back to another structured, optimistic framing, echoing a theme that's appeared throughout.
Our final take revisits the idea of turning hardship into opportunity. This commenter recommends a polished, positive narrative about layoffs, growth, and newfound excitement for future roles. Even though this advice echoes an earlier comment, what makes it stand out is the emphasis on reframing your mindset, not just your story. It encourages you to see the firing as an opening rather than an ending. That perspective can be incredibly grounding when your confidence has been shaken. The trick is to avoid sounding like you're reading a script. Authenticity should guide the positivity, not the other way around. Interviewers respond well to candidates who can acknowledge a challenge without dwelling on it. A line like, "This transition helped me refocus on what kind of work energizes me," quietly communicates growth and self-awareness. Still, this approach works best when you genuinely believe the positive spin you're offering. If the story feels hollow to you, it'll feel hollow to them. The ultimate goal is to craft a narrative that feels honest, hopeful, and aligned with who you are becoming, not who you were at your lowest. With all these perspectives in mind, a larger pattern begins to emerge.
Across all these answers, a common thread ties everything together. Confidence doesn't come from hiding the truth, but from learning how to tell it in a way that honors both your experience and your future. Whether you lean on simplicity, humor, structure, or honesty, the goal is the same: to reclaim your narrative.
What we learned from this discussion is that getting fired doesn't define your career. The way you frame it does. You don't have to spill every detail, and you don't have to pretend nothing happened. A clean, honest, forward-looking explanation is often all you need. Keep it short, keep it calm, and pivot quickly to what excites you about where you're heading. Practice your response until it feels natural, not rehearsed. And above all, remember that a bad job doesn't erase your worth. Every professional has at least one messy chapter. What matters is the chapter you're writing now. So, as we wind down, take a deep breath and let the pressure ease off your shoulders. Interviews aren't interrogations. They're conversations about possibility.
Thanks for spending time with this story today. If you've ever felt insecure about a firing or a tough exit, I hope this reminded you that you're not alone and you're far from defeated. Your next opportunity won't hinge on one bad moment. It'll hinge on the confidence you bring forward. So go gently, stay grounded, and keep moving toward the roles that genuinely fit you.